on the last pod, but we had so much stuff, beautiful stuff to get to, so this could wait. But it feeds in now that we're talking about this narratives, doom and gloom. Benjamin Rush, this guy was the father of American psychiatry and a member of Sons of Liberty. You guys could look into Sons of Liberty. That's probably another episode all about it in
Are
itself.
those the dudes that used to go around and fucking tar people?
I don't know. I looked into them as I was reading about him, but I can't confirm
Go
what
ahead.
you're saying.
Keep going.
But the reason why I'm bringing this man up is because he brought up some. He was like the Surgeon General at the time, but he was into this thing that they were doing during the time of the yellow fever. Which, if you guys don't remember, our longtime listeners, I brought up the yellow fever before because I was talking about the pandemic and I was making a connection on Philadelphia, George Washington, and how they were having uprisings with racial tension at the time. And it just reminded some people of last year with the racial uprisings and the pandemic. And they had a similar situation in Philadelphia. And this guy, Benjamin Rush, comes up because he used mercury in some of his treatments, which, you know, a lot of people, that's one of the big things that people that are not for vaxes usually use or cite is the mercury, because the mercury heavy metal is one of the most poisonous, I believe, things on that known to man, mercury, you know what I mean? But this is of the time that he was into bloodletting, which is also purging the body of all of its blood, you know, like, so he thought that diseases came from an imbalance or something in the blood. So he would like bloodlet or let out people's blood.
Yeah, let them bleed out. And
which essentially killed him, Benjamin Franklin, and George Washington, because he was treating these people. George Washington, yes, George Washington, the first president. Look up this guy, Benjamin Rush, because he had a big influence. So Rush decided that a powder of 10 grains of calomel, mercury, and 10 grains of cathartic drug, jalap, which is a poisonous root of a Mexican plant, and they give the real name of it,
Jesus.
Which was dried into a powder, would create a desired elimination he was seeking. Since the demand for his services was so great, he had his assistants make as many of his powders in the pill form as they could. It was called Dr. Rush's Thunderbolts. So this is one of the guys that like founded how we deal with these situations. That's why we run to these jabs, because we talked about how Rockefeller infiltrated the medicals as well, the medicinal field. So Benjamin Rush, the father of American psychiatry, because he also had he was a dynamic dude at the time, a very powerful dude. He signed the Declaration of Independence. Like, this wasn't just some quack, you know what I mean? Like, so he had an impact on things going forward. As they say, he's the father of psychiatry, and he had his hands in a lot of different things like medicine. So yeah, look up the yellow fever, 1793 in Philadelphia. So I believe that's where they started concocting these vaccinations as we know it too. Because I believe, based on the research I was doing at the time, and the brother that uncovered this stuff when, you know, at the beginning of this whole pandemic, he said something about there was a connection between Philadelphia and the origins of the CDC or you know, whatever foundation became the CDC.
Yeah.
Because the CDC is now, I think, in Atlanta.
Yeah,
so it's not in Philadelphia. But I think there's some connection, you know, to the beginning of...
well, the first, the nation's capital was Philadelphia.
That too. Yeah,
originally.
for sure.
So that's probably what they had there at the same time. And then when they moved to D.C., they probably moved to Atlanta or something like that.
So that fool Benjamin Rush was
Rush.
using mercury way back then. And that's why they still got it as a, whatever they call it, a
check it out,
carrier or something.
Sons of Liberty. We talked about him before.
There you go.
Look at...
he's a member.
In 1765, the British government needed money to afford the 10,000 officers and soldiers living in the colonies and intended that the colonists living there should contribute. The British passed a series of taxes aimed at the colonists. They argued that they should not be held accountable for such taxes. This became commonly known as no taxation without representation. Parliament insisted. The colonists said there was no representative for them in Parliament, so they didn't want to get taxed. And the most incendiary tax was the Stamp Act of 1765, which caused a firestorm of opposition, through legislative resolutions, public demonstrations, threats, and occasional hurtful losses. The organization spread hour by hour after independence starts in several different colonies. By November 6th, the committee was set up in New York. By December, an alliance was formed between groups in New York and Connecticut. And by January, it was Boston, New York, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. And this is what I wanted to tell you was, remember I said they would fucking tar? The Sons of Liberty popularized the use of tar and feathering to punish and humiliate offending government officials.
Damn.
They would tar them, bro. Put hot tar and put feathers all over them.
Benjamin Rush.
Kush and Chemtrails, the world's most dangerous podcast.